Okay, well, I was really excited to fill in for Judy Mahan, who leads the SBDC and CIE while she's away in Europe enjoying some family time. Super happy to be part of this. I met Kiki through AngelCon and my work as a lead consultant here. And today Kiki's going to tell us about her work as a strategy consultant. She helps companies scale and individuals and their companies with Thrive Mind Collaborative, her startup. And Kiki's previous experiences with Airbnb, she helped their training and safety team. She actually founded that team, grew that team to multiple programs globally. And she scaled Airbnb. She started early, so from startup to public. So she's sort of seen it all and had the opportunity to create some really interesting programs to support learning and education and development of that very large team. So Kiki, I'm excited to introduce you and hear your story today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie. I'm so excited to be here. Wish I could be there in person, but I'm so excited to be a part of the SBDC as well. I just have to pitch you guys, give a little pitch real quick. The SBDC, I use the SBDC resources actually for my own business as well. We have so many amazing consultants with different areas of expertise and experience, and it's just been such a joy to meet the community within the SBDC, and all of the companies that are coming through are so innovative, and it's hard not to be excited about small businesses and what you do when you're seeing all of these amazing innovative companies coming through. So yeah, just I guess my little plug for the SBDC. It's been so great to work with you guys. My name is Kiki. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit about my experience, my current business, my experience in the past with Airbnb. It was definitely a ride. So yeah, excited to be here today.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like starting an Airbnb at that startup stage and everyone kind of trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah, great question. So I was employee number 80 at Airbnb. So we were a little bit bigger than some of the startups that we see coming through the hot house. The teams were scattered, to say the least. And it's really interesting. I think so many startups think that they're going to have it all together by the time they have 80 employees, and it's so not the case. But it was, I think the experience in the very beginning was, everyone's a jack of all trades. It wasn't, you may have a job description, but how closely you adhere to that job description is neither here or there. I think it's really a matter of seeing what's in front of you and understanding, how do we get to that next level? What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our core values? How do we make decisions around those? And keep going in the right direction. But really, I think when I started at Airbnb, I started answering phone calls. So I was a surgery scheduler for 5 orthopedic surgeons. I wanted to go to med school. I heard about this company called Airbnb and I applied. My parents thought it was a scam. They were like, "You're staying at a stranger's house in San Francisco and they're flying you up there? Oh no, this is terrible." And I was like, no, I reassured them. I was like, it's fine. We're staying at a stranger's house. Well, alone, right? Like not with other strangers. No, with other strangers. Everyone was like, what are you doing? And now it seems so normal. Airbnb is such a household name, which is really bizarre. I think early on when I told people what I did and who I worked for, they were like, what? Huh? That's never going to work. So that was really interesting. I think also just the fact, so trust and safety didn't exist at Airbnb when I started. The first kind of big trust and safety case that happened right after I started. And we hired someone for the trust and safety team specifically. And I got myself up to San Francisco and sat next to him every day and tried to get all my work done in the evenings. So during the day, I could kind of just sit next to him and learn and figure out what was next. It seemed like such a cool new department. And yeah, to be honest, it's such a blur. 10 years or nine years at Airbnb, it went by so fast. It's so crazy how quickly things, we used to have these jokes about the priority of the hour, right? Or the dumpster fire of the hour, because it would change so quickly. And I think that was really the experience early on. It's so collaborative, so cross-functional. It was a global company. So we're working at all hours of the night. We had sleepovers at the office, all that hustle culture stuff. It was super fun, great experience. And yeah, interesting.
So how did you go from managing the dumpster fires and just, getting the basics of trust and safety? Like, at what point did you or others on the team decide and then convince each other, okay, we have to now put some structure to this and have this team in this role?
Yeah, great question. So I think it became apparent pretty quickly. I think the moment we had a trust and safety team, it was this new shiny team, but it was also kind of a black box. No one really knew what we did. And so it was any difficult case that would come through the operations team would get escalated to trust and safety. So it could be, it was really anything that was a more touchy subject, right? And so it was anything from, this person is yelling at me. I don't know what they need, but they're yelling at me. So I'm going to escalate them to trust and safety so that escalated team can handle it, right? So really quickly, we got this flow of contacts, this flow of customer contacts, and realized we needed to build out the team fairly quickly. I love people. I love welcoming people. I love community. And so it was kind of just a natural fit to start training a lot of the new people that came into the roles. It wasn't really until about 6 months later, when I was trying to be a trainer and also trying to write the policies and the workflows and do the work, that I was like, I'm not going to make it. It's been one and a half years in this role, and I'm not going to make it any longer if we don't have more people. It was the first pitch I ever did. And I remember to this day, the gentleman I had to pitch to, his name was Monroe, and he had worked at eBay, early days eBay, trust and safety. And he just was this idol in my eyes. And I had to pitch to him that, why do we need this training team for trust and safety? What's this going to do? And I think that was the first time I didn't really know what I was doing. And, we all fake it till we make it. And he was one of those people that just gave me so much great feedback. He was such a great kind of role model, and helped me not only pitch what I needed to pitch, but get what I needed, the resources I needed to actually be able to create structure and programs within that trust and safety team.
And so you had that experience, obviously working a ton. Like you said, everybody is running as fast as they can. And, many companies, I think, struggle with that at this very moment, where employees, managers, leaders are all starting to face some burnout because we've had so much change, just change after change after change, or challenge after challenge the last few years. So talk about how you've created some strategies and how you look at that and help your clients, or how that evolved at Airbnb.
Yeah, great question. So that was something that came a lot later at Airbnb. I think burnout and resilience building is something that really found me. It was something that I needed. And so it's interesting now that I help companies or individuals work with resilience building and burnout prevention. I think really what it comes down to is being more self-aware, understanding what it is that you need in that particular moment. What do you need from a business perspective? What's realistic? What's not realistic? I think it's just kind of taking that step back and reassessing. I think for so many people, burnout it can be due to that change fatigue, like what you were talking about, right? Like challenge after challenge after challenge, or change after change. That was a lot of what we saw early days Airbnb. A lot of the burnout was from just this constant iteration, right? It was such an innovative company. They are still such an innovative company. They're very design focused. And so we were constantly iterating on things. Things were constantly changing. And I think one of the big things that we integrated within the teams was a change management process, which really, really helped with that kind of change fatigue. We were able to group smaller changes. We were able to group larger changes that then we would train. And it was all kind of chunked. The information was chunked, rather than, that feeling when you come in the morning and you have 5 million emails in your inbox, like after a vacation or something. It was, think about that, but think about it being themed, right? And so all of your emails, kind of like how Gmail created those little tags, right? Or those little inboxes for promotions, and it kind of groups everything together. It makes it a little bit more digestible. So I think that was probably one of the big programs or pieces of structure that really helped. But in general, what I typically see with people in burnout, it's a mismatch of some sort. So it's either they're working so many hours and they don't know how, they don't have the skills to delegate, or they don't have skills to put up either emotional or physical or energetic boundaries with their manager. And so that's a lot of what we talk about. That's a lot of what I talk about with my clients is boundaries. We talk through kind of what their needs are, reassessing what their needs are. I think a lot of people that experience burnout, I've noticed, have certain characteristics. So they're typically pretty high performers. They're also typically people who really like to do things well, in the sense that I don't want to say a perfectionist, but someone who's really like going back and looking at their work and making sure that they've hit all the marks, right? And a lot of times they're also someone who's either a people pleaser or someone who really wants to add value in some way. None of those things are bad. But when someone is going through over and over and over, they're going through this work and they're working so quickly, it's really easy to forget what your own needs are or where your own boundaries are. And those shift and change over time. And so I think it's really interesting as I sit down with folks and people have these epiphanies and they're like, oh, maybe I should change that. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's change it. So it's kind of fun. It's a lot of self-reflection. And I think in bigger corporate companies looking into kind of employee support programs or employee resilience programs, that was one of the big things we integrated at Airbnb that really helped, which was access to therapy, access to psychologists. So especially for the teams that are doing like content moderation or any sort of, they're dealing with difficult cases day in, day out. Every single call is a difficult case, for those escalated teams. And in that kind of a scenario, having resources that these people can go and chat with someone, or even just teaching mindfulness activities, right? Like when you have a phone call where someone's yelling at you, it's going to impact your behavior, your thoughts, your attitude, right? And so recentering yourself, whether it's through meditation or going for take your next one-on-one break as a walk outside, right? Like some sort of way to kind of recenter yourself, because I think for a lot of people, especially in customer service roles, we don't teach boundary setting. And so when someone's screaming at you, it's really easy to take that on, right? And so I think that's one of the bigger kind of systemic issues that happens with, especially within like operational teams. I've blabbered on for long enough. Have I answered that question? I could talk about this for hours, you guys.
No, this is great. Super helpful. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask what advice do you give to some of your smaller business clients that have, a set amount of resources and limited staff? What are some of the small things folks can do to help support that culture of resilience and, employ some of those strategies?
Yeah, great question. So I think communication is huge. Without clear communication, constant communication, you can't really collaborate. And without that collaboration, you're not going to really know when, burnout sneaks up on you. It's something that, at least for me, I've had 3 major burnouts throughout my career. And so I kind of like to say this work found me, right? I really needed a lot of this support. And so now it's become something that I'm really passionate about. But I think when it comes down to these smaller teams that have the finite resources, how do you stay involved with everyone? How do you stay aware of where everyone is, doing those check-ins, right? Like I've talked with really small teams, and it's sometimes just about one-on-ones and team stand-ups. Like get together and have a conversation, and don't just talk about the tactical work, right? Like it's not just the tactical work, it's also the self-development, right? And so how can you have those constant points of check-in? That's really going to help you kind of over time go, oh, wow, I see this is upticking, right? We don't have the resources to cover it, and it's starting to impact our well-being as a team, or it's starting to impact our culture. We really need to look into maybe putting some more resources in this space, right? But just being aware of it, I think, is the number one thing. And then tracking. I think over time, looking at data over time is so incredibly powerful. And I think it's really easy in a startup. It's like, oh yeah, we'll track that later. We'll talk about that later. We'll come back to it. Which sometimes you have to do, right? You have to prioritize what you need to focus on. But even just talking about it, like bringing it up, I had a conversation with an SBDC client a couple of weeks ago, and they were great. They came to me, they might actually be in the audience, so I won't call you out, but they came to me and they said, we want to think about trust and safety. We want to be aware. What do we do? And I think the first step is really just looking at the risks. So if brainstorm all of the risks that could possibly happen on your platform or through your platform. A lot of times this is more intense when it comes to like offline interactions. So like with Airbnb, there's not an Airbnb person at the listing when you check in. So you might get there and it might not be at all like the photos. And so what are you going to do? Right. And so those were a lot of the early days questions, where now you have an app and there's a really clear link on that app that says like, oh, you have a problem, click here. Right. It probably could even be more clear. And that's 10 years later. Right. But being aware is the first step. What are the risks that are coming your way? How are you going to deal with them? Because if you can kind of start to look around the corner a little bit, and I think that's where a lot of my work comes in, is I've been around the corner. And so sitting down and talking to people about what their challenges are, I can start to tell them or work with them to kind of ask, what's the next step? What's around that corner? What's the next thing that you're going to have to handle? Because a lot of times, if we just know what's around the corner, even if we don't know how to handle it yet, we know it's there. We know it might be coming. And so it's less of a shock when it does come, and you can kind of sit down and handle it. And I think that that was a lot of what I saw at Airbnb early days, when we had finite resources and something else would pop up. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and you'd watch people just break down over one thing, when really it was all of these little things that they didn't anticipate coming. And now they've loaded it all on and they haven't processed, right? And so I think it all comes back to communication, collaboration, and being able to actually brainstorm together. What are the risks? What are we looking at? What might come our way? And how might we deal with those things? And just continuing that conversation.
Thank you. And then we do have a question from Brian.
Yep, in the chat, what resources would you suggest for liability insurance and other forms of legal protection in this day of legal cases? This fear stops me from starting my own business. I feel so vulnerable given how many lawsuits are happening now.
I think I heard that. So we're looking for liability and legal resources to support small businesses.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think how, that's such a big concern. How does somebody address that and move forward with starting a business?
Yeah, great question. So I will say right off the bat, I am not a legal expert at all. We hired a legal team at Airbnb. It was one person for quite a while. And it ended up being both legal and compliance later on. But really find a good startup attorney, right? Find a good startup attorney that you can bounce ideas off of, that maybe would be a part. I mean, we have so many wonderful attorneys and lawyers within this network that would be able to look at your business and help you start to understand what the risks are. Like I said before, if you can identify what the potential risks within your business are, then you can really talk with someone in a legal space and go, these are the potential risks that I'm looking at. How can I cover myself for those? I think it starts with policies. So starting to really outline what is acceptable on your platform or in your business. What is the acceptable way that you want people to engage, right? So at Airbnb, that was one of the first things we started focusing on from a legal perspective, was what are our policies? What do we allow certain things on our site, or do we not allow certain things on our site? It became very apparent very quickly that we couldn't just not have a policy for something. And so as you start, that's kind of the next step, right? Once you start brainstorming, what are all those risks? What are all those things? Then how do we put policies in place so that people know this is how you're expected to act on this site, right? We have no discrimination on the site, right? So like the anti-discrimination policy was one of the first policies that we had launched. And then it's understanding, how do you follow up with that policy, right? So if you have someone on your site or within your business that is going against a policy, what are the repercussions? How do you handle that? What are the consequences, right? And keeping that up, right? And so that's something that I think for us at Airbnb early days with policies, I think that's really how we covered ourselves in a lot of situations, was like, nope, we have a policy and you signed this when it's part of our terms of service. And so that, I think, was the first step. Our legal department grew from there, and we ended up having, I think a Slack channel is really great. I'm all about Slack. And so having a Slack channel with the legal department was really awesome, because you could have people that would go, hey, I have an issue. It's happening right now. I need some legal help. And we would have someone directly that would be able to support them. From an insurance perspective, liability insurance, it's so not my world. So I'm not going to answer that question because I frankly don't know. But I think when it comes down to looking at all of your different liabilities and making sure that you're covered, I think it really does come down to having a good relationship with a startup attorney. I know that for me in my business, I've gone to my attorney and said, like, I don't even know what my risks are in this situation, right? And she's kind of worked with me through that. So yeah, find the expertise. I think SBDC is a great resource. We have open office hours and stuff like that, where you can come and actually ask some of those questions. But really start thinking about the policies and getting your terms of service to outline exactly what your expectations are. That's a good place to start covering yourself, I think, from a legal perspective. Again, not a legal expert. Just want to make sure that's clear.
We do have one more question in the chat. Is starting up a business as a single person a good idea, or is there more strength in numbers?
Oh, that's a trick question. Do I get to know who asked that question? Okay, so, I think that that's such a personal question. If you were to ask me that today and then ask me again next week, I might have completely different answers for you, because as a single person starting a business, I think the hardest part for me has been the fact that I don't have a team. My experience was at Airbnb, where I had these amazing peers. Even if they weren't on my direct team, I had so many amazing people that I worked with. That was the best part of Airbnb, was the people, by all means. I don't have that now. And so I've struggled. That's been a huge challenge for me to overcome. And I don't think I've perfectly overcome it yet, but I think it's all about creating community and finding the resources and not being afraid to ask for help when you need it, right? So I have so many, I said this at the beginning, but I have so many SBDC consultants that I use for my own business when I'm lost, or when I'm in a specific area that's not my expertise, like a legal space, right? And so even just other consultants. And I think for me, the consulting and coaching world is where I am. And the community there, in my experience, has been really, really open and supportive and collaborative and helpful. So the first contract I ever wrote, I wrote that contract not with an attorney. I wrote that contract with another consultant who had been doing some consulting work. Same thing with my first pitch, for consulting work, same thing. I really just used my community. I used my mentors. I still have conversations with my mentors on a regular basis, where I kind of come in and lay it all out, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, yes, you do. Here we go. Let's talk about these things. And they help me organize all of my own thoughts in my brain, which is so helpful, right? And so having that support, I think, is critical, however you find that support. I could imagine I've collaborated with people in my business. I haven't had any partners or anyone. I haven't had employees yet or anything like that, which I'm not sure I want to go that route. But it's, I think as long as you are really, really clear with that other person, you both are really open. And it goes back to what I said before, right? Like constant, open, transparent communication. So how are we doing? What are we doing? What's working? What's not working? Track it, write it down, because that data will come in, in handy later. But I think that's really a personal question. I think understanding what you want. I love the flexibility of owning my own business. I think I would love a partner at some point. That seems really cool. It seems like I'd be able to expand a little bit, but also have someone, but I haven't really found that person yet. So yeah, I think it's totally a personal question. It's doable to start your own business on your own. I think it's a lot more fun when you have a lot of people around and you don't have to go find those people. I've definitely been lonely starting my own business on my own before. Yeah.
Thanks, Kiki. Anyone in person have a question? Just raise your hand. I have a fun question. What was the oddest Airbnb that you were aware of while you were there?
Like oddest place to stay or oddest
place? Yeah.
Oddest place to stay. Well, trying to make sure that I don't get in trouble for any of these stories. So I think this wasn't one of the oddest places I've ever seen was an old airplane that there was talk that it had crashed, that the airplane had crashed, but then they rebuilt the airplane and they built it. So when you're looking at it, it looks like an airplane crash, but then you go around the side, you walk up the stairs and there's part of there's a house built off the back of it. And so you could sleep, there were still things within the plane that looked like an actual plane, but it was all kind of, it was odd. I had never been there, but that was one of the oddest ones I've seen. The one though that sticks in my memory and will always stick in my memory is the Mushroom Dome. So it wasn't anything crazy. It was just like a little tree house, kind of a little mushroom dome up in the trees. I think it's actually up in the Bay Area, slightly north of San Francisco. But it was one of our very first kind of unique listings. It wasn't just an apartment or a house. It was this really cool little mushroom dome, and it didn't even have a bathroom. So you had like a little outhouse outside and like a little loft, it was like camping, glamping. But the cool thing about it was we built a model of it in our office. And so when we moved from our tiny little office to our much bigger office, we built this mushroom dome, and it was, a perfect kind of replica of the mushroom dome. And there were meetings, we would have meetings in there. One of the people that I hired, who is still to this day one of my favorite hires. I've hired some pretty awesome, amazing humans, but I had my interview with her in the mushroom dome. There were no rooms available, and so we had to duck into this little mushroom dome, and there's a bed next to us, and I'm like, "So, tell me about your career." It was very awkward. But yeah, those were probably the two that stick out in my mind.
That's super fun. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kiki.
Of course.
Are there any other questions from the audience here or anybody through the chat? Well, this was super amazing. Lots of great insights. So thank you so much, Kiki. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Reach out anytime. I love chatting about my experiences, and I love problem solving and brainstorming and being a thought leader and partner. So reach out anytime. I'm always around, and you can find me at the SBDC.
Thanks, Kiki.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.